Okay, is this better? Wonderful. Okay, thank you all so much for being here. I'm Mary Pat Higgins. I'm the president and CEO of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, and it is my pleasure to welcome you here today for this very important ceremony honoring Mr. Ralph Hockley, a member of our Dallas survivor community. We are especially excited that so many of Ralph's friends and family members from all over the world many are here in the audience, but many are watching virtually. And we appreciate you being here with us, at least in spirit, today. On behalf of the museum staff and our board, we are thrilled to host today's presentation of the Legion of Honor Award, the highest, most prestigious decoration awarded by France. When the French consulate in Houston reached out to us, we jumped at the chance to host this important event for Ralph today. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Ms. Valérie Baraban, Consul General of France in Houston, for being with us today. Thank you. I can't think of a worthier recipient of this award than Ralph Hockley. As at the museum, we often talk about upstanders, people who stand up for their own rights and the rights of others, and who see something wrong and work to make it right. And Ralph is a true upstander. After fleeing Germany in 1935 to escape Nazi persecution, Ralph and his family sought safe haven in France. Once the situation in France, that the Jews in France began to deteriorate, he and his family managed to overcome immense obstacles yet again to escape, and this time to the United States. But Ralph wasn't content with simply securing his own safety. The minute he was old enough to do so, he chose to serve in his newly adopted country by enlisting in the U.S. Army. Ralph became one of the famous Ritchie boys, training at Camp Ritchie, Maryland, before returning to Europe to help those who were not fortunate enough to escape as he had. But his service didn't stop there. Called up to serve in the Korean War in 1950, he survived 7 military campaigns, including Heartbreak Ridge. It was here that he served so bravely as an officer with French troops. That's one of the main reasons he is receiving this honor today. After returning from Korea, Ralph served within the U.S. Army for almost 30 years. Though the U.S. was not his first home, he has dedicated his life to this country and to standing up for justice and equality. He's been equally committed to his family, the true joy of his life, to his first wife, Eva, who tragically died in 1983, to his lovely wife, Carolyn, and to their blended family of children and grandchildren. And his children are here with us today, all the way from Oregon. Ralph, it has been such a privilege to have you with us. I am so sorry. I skipped forward. We are so honored, Ralph, to be a part of this ceremony, and we are grateful that you are letting us participate in this momentous day. I'd now like to welcome our board chair, Mark Zilberman, to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. I probably need to get over here. As Mary Pat said, I'm Mark Zilberman, and I am the board chair of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. Nope, need the glasses. It's great to be here with you today. One of the greatest privileges of being the board chair is getting to know and work with our local survivors. Over 40 years ago, a group of Dallas survivors got together and came up with the idea for the museum, a place where they could remember their family members killed in the Holocaust and educate future generations about the dangers of prejudice and hatred. We can't thank them enough for their contribution to this community and beyond, and it is truly an honor to be part of this celebration for Ralph Hockley. Mary Pat mentioned that Ralph is a true upstander, and I couldn't agree more. This is such an important concept for us at the museum. The idea that one person can stand up and make a difference, even in the most difficult times. Ralph also embodies the museum's mission to teach the history of the Holocaust and advance human rights, to combat prejudice, hatred, and indifference. He's been working with the museum's education team to document his incredible story, and soon will be sharing it with public audiences. We're especially excited for students to learn from Ralph and to follow his example to become upstanders. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who will present the Legion of Honor Award. And I have to say, just as an aside, I'm off script, by the way. I was at lunch and I was mentioning to someone at lunch that we were presenting this award, and he said, "Oh my gosh, doesn't the president of France have to sign off on that? It's a huge deal." So I'm amazed that and thrilled that Ralph chose to have his award presented here at the museum. Now I'd like to present Mrs. Valérie Baraban, the Consul General for France in Houston. A credentialed philosophy instructor, she began her academic career at the University of California, Berkeley, where she taught French language and philosophy before pursuing her doctoral research in France. Her diplomatic career began in 2005 in the policy branch of the French Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs. She subsequently worked in the Office of the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and Human Rights at the French Embassy in Beijing, as a negotiator for the French delegation to NATO, and at the Élysée Palace as diplomatic advisor of the National Intelligence and Counterterrorism Coordinator. She began her duties as Consul General of France in Houston on September 1st of this year. Please help me welcome Ms. Baraban.
Dear Mr. Ralph Hockley, dear Mrs. Mary Pal Higgins, dear Mr. Mark Zilberman, dear family and friends of Mr. Hockley, I'm so pleased and honored to join you today. Today is a memorable day. I'm thrilled that we are gathering to honor an outstanding person. Dear Mr. Hockley, please let me start by trying to summarize the main periods of your life. You are both a survivor of the Holocaust in Europe and a veteran of World War II as well as the Korean War. You were born on October 17, 1925 in Karlsruhe, Germany, and your birth name is German, Rudolf Martin Hockenheimer. You grew up with your parents, Julius and Lily, and your older sister, Marianne. In 1934, after Kristallnacht, as the Nazi plague contaminated Germany and soon Europe, the family fled Nazi Germany and settled in Marseille, in the south of France, on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. You were 9 years old then, sorry, and you were about to start a new chapter in your life. Thank you. Much better. Speaking French and living like a French boy at a terrible time. In 1939, after the fall of France, you were 14 years old and you volunteered to put your skills at the service of the American Quakers in Marseille as interpreter and office boy. Your father was held in the girls' internment camp, one of the largest internment camps in Europe, located in the Basses-Pyrénées. In May of 1941, the Quakers assisted your family in getting US immigration visa and therefore the release of your father from the camp. At the end of this chapter of your life, you could have taken advantage of the refuge offered to you by the United States, far from the barbarism which was unleashed in Europe. But your courage and your sense of duty continued to guide you. You could not be satisfied with your new freedom as long as your relatives, your friends, your compatriots in Germany and in France continued to be enslaved under Nazi rule. On your 18th birthday, you went to the draft board and reported for active duty on December 29, 1943. War was raging in Europe and in Asia too. You were assigned to intelligence work at Conritchie, Maryland, and arrived back in Europe in April 1945. Dear Mr. Ralph Hockley, you were in Paris on May 8, 1945, when the war in Europe ended. You lived in France this extraordinary moment of liberation, solidarity, and jubilation, after 5 years of extreme suffering and desolation, of which you had your share in France and in Europe. Back in the United States, after graduating from Syracuse University, you enlisted in the United States Army as lieutenant, part of the 2nd Infantry Division, one of the first American Army units sent to fight in the Korean War in 1950. As an artillery forward observer, you supported the French battalion of the United Nations forces. You notably helped the French armies during the deadly Heartbreak Ridge battle between September and October 1951, a few kilometers north of the 38th parallel. After 3 weeks of fighting, the 23rd Infantry Regiment of the 2nd American Division saved the advances of Hill 851 with a flamethrower. The last peak fell into the hands of the UN forces. Both sides suffered heavy losses, with more than 3,700 Americans and French dead soldiers. Throughout your life, you have shown exemplary courage, both in your life as a man and in your military feats. You can be proud of having served in one of the finest services, intelligence. You survived the Holocaust, the worst tragedy the world has known. You have drawn extraordinary resilience from this negative experience, embodied and transmitted the most beautiful human values: solidarity, courage, and confidence in life. You have founded a wonderful family, which demonstrates your infallible confidence in life. Today, you live with your wife, Caroline, and you have 2 children and 3 stepchildren. Today, dear Mr. Ralph Hockley, you are an outstanding example, an invaluable witness within the community of the survivors in Dallas. I have the privilege to be the representative of friends who will reward you today. And I have to say that as a mother of children who belong to the community of French survivors' descendants, I feel fortunate and I'm deeply touched to be the one who will bestow France's highest civilian honor, the French Legion of Honor, on you, Mr. Ralph Hockley, a Holocaust survivor and a veteran of World War II and Korean War. The history of the Legion of Honor stems back to 1802, after all French orders of chivalry were abolished during the French Revolution. Napoleon Bonaparte, who was then the First Consul of the First French Republic, instituted a new order to recognize merit, the National Order of the Legion of Honor. This was meant to reward civilians and soldiers who had achieved great things in the service of France. Since its creation, the award has remained the highest, most prestigious decoration in France. It's given solely as recognition of merit or bravery, being open to men and women of all ranks and professions. Dear Ralph Hockley, on behalf of the President of the French Republic, and by virtue of the powers conferred upon us, we hereby declare you Knight of the Legion of Honor. Long live France, long live the United States, and L'Chaim.
What do you do on a day like this? Madame Consul General Valérie Baraban, Mary Pat Higgins, CEO of the Dallas Holocaust Museum, Board Chairman Mark Zillam, dedicated staff of the Holocaust Museum, headed by Sarah Bosch Jacobson, thank you for making this event possible. I would warmly like to thank Mr. Patrick Baudouin, former deputy in the French Parliament and mayor of Saint-Mandé, a suburb of Paris, who is president of ANAF-ONU and Corée, French Veterans Organization of the Korean War, and Roger Quintard, Secretary General of ANAF, who are the originators of this magnificent medal bestowed upon me and who did all the hard work to make it happen. Je remercie beaucoup M. Patrick Baudouin, ancien député au Parlement français et maire de Saint-Mandé, banlieue de Paris, le président de l'ANAF-ONU et Corée, groupe des anciens combattants de la guerre en Corée, et Roger Quintard, secrétaire général de l'ANAF, qui sont à l'origine de cette magnifique médaille qui m'a été présentée et qui ont fait tout le travail. Un grand merci à vous deux pour votre amitié. President Baudouin and Secretary General Quintard are watching this on Zoom from Paris. Thank you. I also want to thank my dear wife of 37 years, Carolyn Glover Hockley, without whom nothing that happens in my life would occur. Her late husband was a U.S. Air Force reconnaissance pilot in the Vietnam War. She's a real military wife, knowing all the hardships thereof. She's the mother of 3 children, Chris Harris, Heidi Harris, Hargis, who is sitting right here, and Dr. Kirk Harris. My late wife, Eva Frankel, the mother of my children, was rescued as a toddler and brought out by rail from Berlin in September 1941 to Portugal. Eva died in 1983 of an accident. Also thanks to Eric Corticciato and his wife Valérie. My link to France and Dallas. Thank you for your assistance, and to my family and friends who are here in France, in Germany, in Sweden, in Luxembourg, and throughout the world. Thank you for your love and friendship. This is being seen in all those countries. À ma famille et amis aux États-Unis, en France et de par le monde, merci pour votre amitié. I want to introduce my son, Cliff Hockley, and my daughter, Denise Hockley. Both are here from Beaverton, Oregon, near Portland. And my nephew, Peter Pennekamp, you're somewhere. Okay. It's hard to see people when they have a mask on.
I know.
He is here from Eureka, California. Peter is the son of my sister, Marianne, now 97 years old, a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, in child social work. I mention my children with pride. Cliff is president of a fairly large commercial real estate company in Portland, and Denise is a former child protective service officer in San Diego and now a family therapist in Beaverton, Oregon. Peter, my nephew, is a former vice president of National Public Radio and former executive director of the Humboldt Foundation in California. I mention this because you can never highlight enough the fact that as first-generation Americans, They represent what America gains when it welcomes refugees. Madame Consul Générale Baraban, your presentation to me today on behalf of the government of France of the Légion d'honneur is an honor I could only dream about. As a boy in Marseille, I learned what the Légion d'honneur represented. The few people I knew who wore it seemed like special human beings to me, with a little red ribbon in their lapel as a recognition. In September 1940, my father was being held at the Gursk internment camp, and my mother, my sister, and I were still in our apartment in Marseille. As school resumed, my sister and I went back to our lycées. Girls' and boys' schools were separate. The director at Lycée Saint-Charles, where I went, told my mother and me that I could not return because they felt that the other boys would beat me up for being German, France having lost the war to Nazi Germany. The fact that I was Jewish and more at risk from the Nazis than any Frenchman made no difference in the decision. Though I stated that my classmates for over 5 years were my friends, it made no difference in the decision. By accepting destiny on that day and not fighting it, my family's life was ultimately saved. It would not have happened had I not been kicked out of school. My mother, a person of endless social conscience, was concerned about my lack of activities and not being in school. She offered my services as a volunteer to the American Quakers, whose office for helping refugees was now in Marseille, since France had been divided in half and Marseille was the major city in so-called unoccupied France, which didn't mean you didn't see guys with a swastika on their sleeve walk around the streets every day. I was to be used as an interpreter. I spoke German and French fluently and also passable English. The refugees spoke mostly German and no French or English. The Quakers accepted me, more of destiny. At the age of 14 and 15, besides doing routine office and interpreting work, as the Quaker representative, I obtained total access to the visa section of the U.S. consulate at a time when other refugees stood in line for days to be seen. The visa section was headed, and please remember this, the visa section was headed by the U.S. Vice Consul Hiram Harry Bingham. Vice Consul Bingham, who in contradiction to the U.S. Department of State policies of allowing as few refugees into the United States as possible, issued visas to some 2,500, mostly Jewish applicants, including such luminaries as Marc Chagall and many other known names. Persecution, especially of our parents, in pre-war and war-torn France must be mentioned. They had a difficult life even before our father was interned as an enemy alien in the camp of Les Milles and Gurs. The Quakers and Mr. Bingham helped us first to get my father out of Gurs and then to escape France in May 1941. Vice Consul Hiram Bingham was recalled for his actions in June 1941. You can see we got out in May of 41 and he was kicked out in June because of Vichy applying pressure on the U.S. State Department and State Department being unhappy that he did what he did. Because the Consul General in Marseille, a man by the name of Fullerton, followed everything that Washington said and did not tolerate what Bingham did. Under Colin Powell, I might add, Harry Bingham, belatedly, and after his death, was offered the highest award of the State Department for having worked according to his conscience and not to what he was told to do. In the United States, my odyssey continued. At 17 in New York, I co-founded and became the Secretary General of the Jeunesse France Libre, the Free French Youth, supporting General de Gaulle, and also worked for the Gaullist newspaper France Amérique. After my World War II U.S. Army service in the U.S., France, and Germany from 1944 to 1946, I returned to New York to pursue college. I graduated from Syracuse University in 1949. Then the Korean War started. As you've heard, I was commissioned as second lieutenant military intelligence while I was at Syracuse. The war in Korea started on the 25th of June, 1950. As an artillery lieutenant with the 2nd Infantry Division, I was sent to Korea on the 20th of June, so I didn't waste any time. I served from August 1950 to December 1951 in that miserable but successful war. It included service with the French Battalion of the United Nations, le Bataillon Français de l'ONU. They were part of my 2nd Infantry Division as an additional battalion. In addition to many other battles, I fought with the French in the Battle of Heartbreak Ridge, which the French called Crève-Cœur. Let me highlight, and this is important, but because you can hear people say the opposite, let me highlight that the UN effort in Korea gained the freedom of the South Korean people. And there is no doubt about that. The prosperity of South Korea today is unparalleled. The Korean War is a war we and 21 other countries of the United Nations won. Even today, despite the success and victory, there's still only an armistice instead of a peace treaty. That's because of the clown who is head of North Korea and his family. Later, my 25 years in Germany as a U.S. Army intelligence officer, part of a post-World War II tripartite arrangement of the United States, France, and the UK. In those years, France was never very far from my life. Simultaneously, I served in the U.S. Army Reserve and attained the rank of colonel. In Edith Piaf's song, Non, je ne regrette rien, she sings, avec mes souvenirs, j'ai allumé le feu. Je repars à zéro. In English, with my memories, I have lit a fire. I restart from zero. For me, that is different. Every memory is important to me. I would never destroy any of them. I've been unbelievably lucky so many times. The famous American baseball player Yogi Berra said, when you get to a fork in the road, take it. Le joueur de baseball Yogi Berra a dit, quand vous arrivez à une fourche dans la route, prenez-la. The story of my life has been that a good fate always made me take the right road from that fork. Un bon destin, l'histoire de ma vie, m'a toujours fait prendre la route qui a sauvé ma vie. And so, I stand before you today, accepting with humility this great honor from France, my second homeland. Pour cela, je suis aujourd'hui devant vous et accepte cet honneur de ma deuxième patrie, la France, en toute humilité. Merci, Madame la Consul Générale, de tout mon cœur. And thanks so much to the wonderful people of the Holocaust Museum who opened their doors for this event. Merci, merci, merci. Thank you. Madame la Consul Générale, je vais vous présenter une copie de mon livre. Malheureusement, il n'est pas tout à fait nouveau parce qu'il n'y en a plus de nouveau. Il a été publié en 2000. Et ça raconte toute l'histoire dont nous avons parlé. I'd like to present you, Madame Baraban, with this book, my book that was published in 2000, which represents what we talked about today. The book isn't new because you can't get it new, but it's in pretty good shape. Merci beaucoup. Merci. Merci. Thank you, Mary Pat.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being with us, Ms. Baraban. Thank you for coming from Houston to bestow this honor on Ralph. We're very grateful, and we are so thankful that you allowed the museum to be a part of this. Ralph, we have loved having you in our family these last 7 or 8 years, you and Carolyn, and just so proud to be able to help you with this today and to invite all of you to join us for a reception in our courtyard. We hope that you will come and see this beautiful medal that I bet will be on this lapel fairly often, right? Yeah, please, it's a really wonderful thing. Thank you for joining us. Loved ones, thanks for flying in for this. It means so much that you're here to celebrate with us. Thanks. Let's go have tea sandwiches now.
Merci.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Again, you guys are unbelievable.
So proud of you.
Thank you.
Such an honor.
Before you all leave the stage, can we get a photo of the four of you?
Sure.
Maybe I'll move the podium and do the flags.
Oh, that'd be good.